A listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, the growing crisis over funding for firefighters in Victoria. In the wake of last week's devastating bushfires, Premier Jacinta Allan is under increasing pressure to come clean over allegations the CFA doesn't have enough funding. Unions say the Victorian government is gaslighting firefighters, warning more property and lives will be lost with a horror bushfire season set to continue. That interview in just a moment. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Wednesday, the 14th of January. Palestinian Australian author Dr. Randa Abdel-Fattah has threatened the South Australian Premier with legal action. Lawyers acting for Abdel-Fattah allege comments from Premier Peter Malinauskas about her scheduled appearance at Adelaide Writers' Week at a press conference yesterday were defamatory. In a social media statement, Abdel-Fattah described the Premier's remarks as, quote, a vicious personal assault. The Premier has defended his comments. Abdel-Fattah was removed from the Adelaide Writers' Week program last week, sparking widespread backlash. The controversy led to the event being cancelled and the resignation of the festival board after almost 200 participants also pulled out of the event. Tom Silvagni has filed an application to appeal his rape convictions. The 23-year-old Melbourne man was sentenced to 6 years and 2 months in jail last year after he was convicted on 2 counts of rape. Silvagni raped the woman after entering her dark bedroom and pretending to be her boyfriend, later falsifying evidence to cover his tracks. And former US President Bill Clinton and former US Secretary of State Hilary Clinton have refused a congressional subpoena linked to an investigation into convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. In a letter, the Clintons called the subpoena legally invalid and accused Republican Committee Chair James Comer of pursuing a politically motivated inquiry. The Clintons say they have already provided all relevant information and claim the subpoena is intended to harass and embarrass them. Now it's time to get into our deep dive on the Victorian firefighting funding crisis. For more than 12 months, local residents, firefighters, volunteers and unions have been warning the state government that they need more funding. They say their fire trucks are outdated and equipment and infrastructure is inadequate, meaning their lives are being put at risk when they're trying to fight fires and save other people's lives and property. This month, Victoria's bushfires have again put a firm focus on the funding crisis, but Premier Jacinta Allan has denied allegations about any cuts and is standing firm on her commitments to local firefighters and volunteers. Joining us to explain the concerns from firefighters is Peter Marshall, the United Firefighters Union's Victorian Branch Secretary. Peter, thanks so much for joining us. We know so many residents across Victoria have lost everything, their properties. We know at least one life was also lost. A lot of residents are saying these latest bushfires are some of the most serious they've ever seen.
Well, we're not scientists, but I've been a firefighter since 1984 and campaign fires used to actually happen every 8 or 9 years. When I say campaign fires, we're talking about very large-scale fires that ran for a week, maybe 2 weeks. We're seeing those happening every couple of years now, and I'm not entering into the climate change debate, but certainly something's changed. Black Saturday, for the very first time, the fire scientists were able to identify the fact that the fire was making its own weather, and as a result of that just propagated the fire even more so.
Peter, there have been a lot of concerns from local residents and also firefighters and, of course, the unions about cuts to CFA funding, but also concerns and protests over this Emergency Services Volunteer Fund. And people are concerned about exactly where this money is going.
Well, fire services have been restricted not only in their increase in budgets just to keep contemporary times with the cost of living and everything else that goes along, but at the same time, I have a document from the 2022-23 budget bid to the Cabinet of Victoria that was leaked to me that says We need more money for fire trucks. This is from Fire Rescue Victoria executive leaders. We need, because we can't protect. We can't guarantee the safety of our members, and we can't guarantee the safety of the community. Now, that's a cabinet in confidence document where there's an admission from one of the major fire services in Victoria. It says we haven't got the equipment to protect the public or our own employees. And that bid was rejected. How is that able to happen when the money that's collected through the fire service levy is not the prop up of other projects? It's there for one reason. It's quarantined. It's supposed to be for provision of new equipment. As we speak, 64% of Fire Rescue Victoria's fire trucks, first-line appliances, they're out of date. They should be off the road. They break down on a daily basis, and you'll hear more about this in the next couple of days because we're about to release those figures. That's 138 trucks that are unreliable, resulting in situations whereas that firefighters have had to enter a burning building to perform a rescue, whereas the truck failed. Not once, but 12 times they tried to engage the pump and it failed, leaving the firefighter with no option but to having entered a building that was well alight. And this is about 2 o'clock in the morning, where there's radio traffic saying persons reported trapped, one of our worst fears. Hadn't to make a decision that they had to go in to rescue that person or without a water supply, without a lifeline, because the trucks were unreliable. Now, that's how serious it is. And if I talk about the CFA, we're talking about the 792 tankers that are actually over age. In other words, they should be replaced. And out of those, 230 of the 792 are actually over 31 years of age. There's actually firefighters in the job that are actually younger than the fire trucks. So we asked the question, and we've been, not just in the context of these fires, we've been saying for over 12 or 18 months, we need new trucks. Firefighters were left to having to go into battle without the necessary tools to maximise not only their protection but the community's protections. Now, it's all right for people to say, why are you raising this now? No, we've been raising this, both volunteer and career firefighters have been raising this for at least 12 months, if not more.
So, Peter, in regards to these lack of resources, the cut to funding, the old trucks, the equipment failing, the infrastructure failing, that's not only putting the lives of these extraordinary volunteers and firefighters at risk, but it also means they can't go in and save lives and save property. Do you think that's a fair comment?
That is a fair comment, but, see, what the government actually exploit is the commitment that volunteer and career firefighters have to the community. It is within their legal ability for firefighters to say, I won't use that equipment. I don't have to by law because it's unsafe. But the government know that firefighters won't do that because if they are not using that equipment, the reality is the community will perish. So that compromise that firefighters are being put in, the government's playing on that. They know that firefighters will continue to do the job, even if it means that they're actually putting an unnecessary risk on top of how dangerous fires are anyway. So it is a fair comment, but it's a reality. And I've already explained at least one occasion, and there's multiple, where firefighters are being put at unnecessary risk because of the lack of funding and the lack of engagement by this government, being the Allan government.
Peter, in regards to the response from Jacinta Allan, we know she's been heckled by locals over the last couple of days. The Premier is adamant there hasn't been any cuts to funding. There's even been a comment from the Chief Fire Officer, Jason Heffernan, and I'm quoting Jason here saying, quote, the CFA's budget has increased year on year, and I can also confirm the available budget to the CFA this year is some $20 million more than it was last year. Who's telling the truth?
Jacinta Allan says that we've increased the CFA's funding by $80 million leading up to this fire season. What she doesn't tell the community is that it is not unusual leading into a fire season where there's one-off financial uplifts, but that's for the engagement of aircraft. Now, if you have a look at her own website, in November she put out a press release announcing the early engagement of aircraft because of the potential bad fire season. And that's the $80 million along with some other programs in relation to water storage and community awareness. That's not CFA budget. That is what the government is. If you go back, the government's done that for the last 10 years. It's in relation to the procurement of contractors for aircraft. It's not recurrent funding for the CFA. So that's spin. And it's disgraceful spin against the backdrop where you've had substantial loss of properties. Communities have been devastated. And here's the Premier saying, oh, no, we put 80 million. No, you didn't. The Premier needs to come clean on this. To answer your question, I do not accept there's been budget increases to either CFA or FRB. And I do not accept for one moment that there's been an investment in relation to the concerns raised by firefighters.
Peter, in regards to what we've seen with the start of the bushfire season, there are concerns from the fire authorities and the Weather Bureau we could be in for more bushfires over the next couple of weeks and months. How serious is this situation right now that firefighters and volunteers going out there don't have the equipment and don't have the infrastructure to not only protect and be safe in their workplace, but actually to save lives and save property?
It is critical. We're currently in a situation, not outside looking in, but we're in a situation where potentially having catastrophic fires and asking firefighters to respond to that with equipment that shouldn't even be in service. Now, as I said, we've already had situations where firefighters had to do things that put their own life at risk above what normally happens with a fire. It's a dangerous occupation, and that is because of the equipment is faulty. So Victoria has a real problem, and it's no good spinning this with public relations out of the Premier's office. And we'd love to see the truth come out where you're able to actually cross-examine people, subpoena documents. I will say this. As a result of the concerns of the firefighters and Fire Rescue Victoria, they went to the Fair Work Commission. This is 8 months ago, and they asked for an audit to be conducted on their firefighting fleet. They wanted to do a joint audit. Fire Rescue Victoria resisted that. Anyway, they've gone ahead and completed their own audits with KPMG. They won't release that documentation. They buried that documentation. Why? Because it tells the story from their own organisation or from KPMG about how bad it is. The government should compel Fire Rescue Victoria to table that documentation because it will tell the same story that firefighters have been saying for the last 12 or 18 months.
We really appreciate your time, Peter, and yet again, we just thank all the extraordinary firefighters and volunteers who every single day during these horrendous bushfires put their lives on the line. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I do appreciate what you said in relation to the firefighters because they are good people and they're being badly let down by this government, and that's unforgivable from our point of view.
That was United Firefighters Union Victorian Branch Secretary Peter Marshall. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning with a deep dive with the latest on Grok, Elon Musk's AI chatbot. And we'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram @The Briefing Podcast. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company.